Hey everyone, and welcome back to Meta Maniacs. And just like we said in the last couple episodes, we're going to be switching up the format. So this week, you won't be getting gameplay. Instead, I'll be doing a deck profile on the deck that I used last week. Kind of going over my mentality, how I built the deck the way I did, and some of the card choices I made. Some of the feedback I did have last time is the deck profile should be a little slimmer, so I'm not going to go over each individual effect on every single card. I'll leave you guys to pause the video if you really see fit to read the card in its entirety, but I'll just be going over the finer points and the reasons why I included them in this deck at the number that I did. So, without further ado, let's get right to it. Alright, so this right here will be the deck that I played on last week's video. I was tasked by my previous opponent to build Akuma 3-dot on Void. And it's actually something that I've been toying around with anyway, so I'm really glad that I got the chance to do it on stream. Again, I will preface that this is a draft 1 or 2. It's not meant to be an end-all, be-all, bring this to your local tournament and you're going to crush everyone kind of deck. It's mainly just, I like building decks with restrictions. This may not be the best deck. It is also locked to a single symbol, so there are going to be no off-symbol cards. So there might be some off-symbol cards that you might think will be great. And I encourage you guys to take this deck list as more of a framework for what it's doing, and you can build off it by swapping certain cards out or adding some, because this card is a lean cut 59 card deck, as I have a particular strategy that I'm gunning for, and I want it to be as slim as possible to try to make it as consistent as I can. So we'll start off. I will read through in the entirety the important key parts, which will be the characters. I wanted to make a character stacker with Akuma 3-dot because he has 2 other versions that are currently legal in standard. So first we'll go over the main effect, the bread and butter behind why I built the deck the way I did. So we got Akuma. He's a 7-hander. He's a little squishy at 21 health, but given a 7-hander, he's actually not that bad. His first enhance is going to be one of the main things we built the deck around, which is enhance, discard 1 card, your attack gets plus X damage, where X is the difficulty of the discarded card, and you give your opponent -1 to all their, or to the next check. Is it all the checks? Sorry, yeah, the next check. Failing, of course, does not cause the combat phase to end. Now, you can use this defensively on your opponent's turn, but 9 times out of 10 you'll be using it when you attack. It helps with their blocking capabilities, so it's kind of like it gives it +1 speed virtually, and anywhere between 1 and 7 damage, which is pretty beefy. The next Akuma is probably these two. I can't ever decide which one I think is more important. It's a very dependent situational on which one I want to attach first. So we'll go over the 2-dot. This one is widely known. People know what it does already. You can flip cards in your card pool to make checks less prominent. You can also use it to do cheeky things like cancel your attack if it's blocked, to, make it so they can't reversal or get any when blocked triggers. The other one, it has an effect as well that allows you to put cards in your card pool either face up or face down to give it +1 damage for each face down card in your card pool, and give your attack stun 1. You can only do this on your attack, but it's still pretty great. It gives you a little extra damage, but the important thing here is it gives you stun 1, and it also helps you fuel one of our attack cards, which we'll get into later. The next one, of course, is Akuma 1-dot, which has commit E, your opponent discards 1 momentum, and if it's your turn, they also discard a card. And that's the main reason we run this. As an extra bonus icing on the cake, it also has enhance, destroy 1 foundation. Your opponent's next check to play a card gets -2. Failing does not cause this to end the combat phase. Now, you'll notice we have 3 different ways of hacking checks. We also have a way to discard. That's going to be the main thing here. The overarching theme of the deck is I wanted to use Akuma 3-dot's ability to boost cards' damage as high as possible, and then either discard their hand so they can't block, or hack their check to such a great degree that they're going to be at a near impossible block. So they just kind of have to face tank these big beefy attacks. And onto that, we will flip these bad boys over like I did in the previous one, because we've already talked about them. We'll get to the last character here, which just kind of goes along with that strategy of getting beefy attacks. It's also a little bit of defense as well, because we are kind of squishy. We run 2 copies of Noob Sabat. nice 0 block, or you can play them at a 3 diff to respond next time an attack is played to either give it plus X or minus X, where that is the card's printed damage, which is, great to either beef up your damage or stop yourself from getting dunked on by an enemy's attack. Run 2 copies of those. Another key thing here is it also gives us a bunch of 6 checks. So when we are doing stuff, we can either run this deck, as you saw in the gameplay video, off of very little foundations and have some pretty consistent attacks no matter what. And I just like having a lot of 6 checks because it just makes it feel a lot better when I can pass checks all the time without having to pay stuff. The next part we'll get into is the attacks, being the next most important part of the deck. We'll start off with our gauge package. As I said, we are stacking characters, so we'll want at least some amount of gauge in here. So what we got here is we have Affliction, 4 copies. It's a great attack. It's only a 3 diff, so it's going to, be able to be played at multiple ends of the turn. Sometimes you can literally just turn 1, throw this bad boy out. We only run 2 checks, I believe, so chances are you're going to pass this under anything that's flipped. And you can catch your opponent with your pants down, and they can't stop the immediate gauge, which will give you a good heads up. It also has Breaker 1, and it lets you peek the top cards or use momentum to draw more cards. It's one of the few cards that actually uses momentum outside of a card we'll get to later. So it's nice to have around. It's saved me a couple times, and revealing the top card is important. Another reason why it's great is because you can name Akuma, since we have so many Akumas in the deck, and you might just draw an Akuma off it, and drawing an Akuma is important because your Akuma 3-dot ability. I didn't go over that when I said it, but now that we're in attacks, it's a great time. The card you discard can be other copies of Akuma, which, if you remember, like most characters, it has a difficulty of 6. So not only do you get value out of your character cards that are in hand by pumping your damage 6, and hacking their check by 1, but it just allows you to use this to call it and draw more off the top so you can keep fueling it over and over again, because this is not a once per turn enhance. You can do this on every attack you throw. So eventually one of them is going to punch through, and even something with as low damage as 2, if you add 6, it's now a 4 mid for 8. And even if they half block that with the gauge 2, you're going to get your gauge off. It's pretty consistent. So we run 4 copies of those. The next gauge card is Shadow Throw. We don't always like to detach characters in this case, but since we do have multiple copies of each version, there are going to be times where you have 1 or 2 of the same. Obviously, you don't need 1 or 2 of the same, so you use those for fuel for things like Shadow Throw. Place a character in the card pool that's attached, and then you get to cancel their attack and attack yourself. With the gauge 5 being a throw, it's nice because under other decks that aren't Noob Sabat, it's kind of hard to get that damage up to 10 or more, so you can guarantee the gauge, assuming they don't have throw tech. But this bad boy also allows you to, with Akuma's ability, pitch one of these difficulty 6 or difficulty 5 attacks from your hand to guarantee that this is going to gauge, which, as I said before, you don't always want to detach your characters, but if you have something in hand that can buff this damage and you're confident they don't have throw tech, you're going to get that character right back anyway. So you might as well cancel their attack, get some more damage in, and you get to look at the top card of the deck, which is also important. It's not just nice to know the next check, but because, as you'll see as we go through these cards, we have a lot of different ways to draw cards off the top of our deck. So it's really nice to be like, flip it over, hey, it's a heart of, or Queen of Hearts, or it's a character, or something else that costs a boatload of difficulty. Let's pick that up, and then guarantees our Shadow Throw. We run 3 copies, mainly because at 4, we don't have enough extra characters to where we're always going to be throwing it. Sometimes you'll just throw it on a regular attack on your turn because you don't have the characters there. So at 4, I felt I was seeing it just a bit too much, and cutting down on 2 checks is always nice, so we keep it at a nice 3. The next attack is one of our big spenders for momentum, or one of the reasons why we save at least 1 momentum, is we're stacking characters. We run 5 Rose Mystiques. It's a 5 difficulty, so it's in that right range where you won't have any trouble playing it more often than not, but it's also a nice +5 damage if you don't feel like throwing it. It's a speedy 6 high for 6. It's one of the few cards in the deck that have a high base speed, so you might just punch this attack through with a damage buff, just solely based off its raw stats, which is always nice to do. And it's a high, which kind of mixes it up a bit because most of the things we're throwing here are mids. So it gives a little bit of a mix up, and it lets you seal something in your opponent's staging area, which can sometimes be the one defensive piece you need to lock down to ensure that you can punch through the rest of your stuff. Run 4 copies of those. It's a great attack, does great things. The next one is one that I'm actually really happy is in this deck. It's got so many facets to it that it's awesome. Oh, sorry. I forgot to mention the reason why this is in here. Since we're trying to discard cards, the main enhance here, we discard 1 momentum, and your opponent will discard a card for every character you have. So, you have all 2 of your dudes attached or more, and you can potentially just have them pitch their entire hand at the start of your turn, meaning every attack you throw will be buffed with damage, and they just have nothing to do anything about, which is great. And then Queen of Hearts. Another reason this card is great is it's not the best normally. It's a little bit too slow and costs a lot. Its effect is good, but outside of that, it's not the greatest because it's also at the mercy of whatever enhances your opponent has. But in this case, it's a value all around. The Void Only enhance allows you to reveal their hand, so you'll have a good, introduction to what blocks they may or may not have, so you know if it's even worth buffing attacks in the future. It'll also allow you to gain all the enhances on that, and they remove it from their hand, aka they basically discard a card. So it gets removed something from their hand, a potential block. It allows you to see what blocks they do have at their disposal and or what might be coming on the follow-up turn. And it's a powerful attack, which we'll get into why that's important when we get to our foundations. And it's a 7 difficulty, which normally you'll start your turn with this because it's so expensive, but if it's in your hand, you can just give a different attack plus 7 damage, and it's just straight value all around. It's also a great target for noob because it's 7 base damage. So if you've already discarded all their cards with something like Rose Mystique, then you drop this bad boy down, you noob Sabat it. Sure, you'll have to pay a little bit because, it's going to be your 3rd card. You'll pay some foundations, but it's base 14 damage. You pitch an Akuma, it's another 6 damage. You're now doing 21 damage off an attack that they potentially have no ability to stop. So the fact that it's a 2-speed just doesn't even matter. Doesn't matter at all. Plus, you'll get some radical enhance from something in their hand that may or may not do anything, but more often than not, the opponent runs enhances that are good, so it's most likely good for you as well. And we run 3 copies of those just because it is all around value, but we do have limited space for attacks, and it being so expensive, it's not always the best to have in hand. Sometimes you do want an attack you can easily throw. Which brings us to our last attack. We run 3 copies of Congo Konretsuzan. I think that's how you pronounce it. Akuma attack, Akuma 2 dot. This will help fuel when we start stuffing stuff in our card pool face down with Akuma's ability, getting incremental buffs to damage, and then being able to just drop them all by dropping this bad boy. The face downs, of course, don't count towards progressive, and then you discard all of the face downs that you placed in there over the course of your turn, and buffing it with powerful. It's also a reversal, so you can do the cheeky block with Noob Sabat, reversal with that, flip Noob, boost this damage, then discard the Noob because it's face down now, and then you just get a bunch of, bonuses here. So I just felt it worked well, and it has a really nice 0 low block just for when people throw out those random nutcrackers and stuff. And that covers it for our attack lineup. We'll briefly touch on these couple assets here. Albion is, we'll briefly go over it, but this is a really, really good card in this deck. First of all, it's an asset that helps you gauge. It gives any attack you want gauge 3, and if you already have 2 dudes in your starting area, it'll give you -2 difficulty and +2 damage on your next attack, which helps when you're doing stuff like later game Queen of Hearts or literally playing any attack. It's always nice to get 2 more damage and have it easier to cast. But the other reason why this is a clutch card is the commit, add 1 character from your staging area to your hand, change the zone of this attack to any other. We run a lot of mids, and or if we wanted to block, we can play it defensively, tap it, grab an Akuma, block with our Akuma, do, flipping stuff, whatever else shenanigans we can pull out. Or offensively, you can tap it, pick up one of your extra Akumas, or one of the Akumas that you already use the enhances on, and then you have an Akuma in hand to discard for +6 damage. It's pretty dope. We run 2 of those. It's also got a decent block, and it's a spammable asset. I guess you'd say. And then we run 1 copy of Manus and Ias. We have a lot of nice enhances on all of our attacks, and it's nice to spread that love around. It's also good to make sure you can shuffle in your attacks, because we only run 17, which, I don't know, I guess is about average, but I generally try to do 30% attacks for a little bit more aggression, but this just helps us get our attacks back in when we need it, and it helps us cherry pick, and more often than not, the enhances we want. So when you have a Rose Mystique in your discard, that now means that if you have this on the field, any of your attacks potentially become Rose Mystique, discard your opponent's hand. It's pretty great when it gets on the field. And that's all our assets. We'll cover our 4 actions, which I think only one of them is going to be something that people will be surprised to see. We got 1 copy of Tagoro Brothers, 1 copy of Revoke. Don't need to say anything about those. Pretty much everyone knows about it. Canceling effects is nice. Sometimes your opponent's going to do some clutch draw effects. It'll be nice to cancel those when you're trying to deplete their hand. Or cancel something if they're going to end your life with it. You know, they play a moonset, use powerful 8 times. You can't block it. Just cancel the powerful, then you're good. We got Spell Circle, gives you momentum access once it hits the discard pile pretty much for the rest of the game. So anytime your Rose Mystique comes up, you always have the momentum to pay for it. Allows you to do some other shenanigans with your foundations, and also just use powerful on some of your attacks. It's also good to do too. And of course, the main reason is Void. If it's in your hand, remove it from the game, your opponent discards a card, and then it's in the remove pile for you to grab later for momentum. The next one is Call of the Dreamlands. Now this works on both modes. In the beginning of the game, it's nice to see, because if you have a handful of foundations, you can get that early build in to really secure being able to go aggressive right away. With its form, you play 4 non-attack cards and ignore progressive difficulty. It just allows you to build really nicely at different instances in your turn. Doesn't even have to be at the beginning. You could play a couple foundations, play this, then play a bunch more foundations, maybe build your whole hand first turn. But another reason it's here is the remove effect. Response remove after your opponent makes a check. The check gets -X, where X is equal to the characters in your staging area. Since we're going to have, at least, hopefully, 3 or more characters, we can do this to help push our big attacks through. If we can't quite, as you remember, get discarded cards, we have the other mode on all our Akumas, which is hack the check of the block so they just can't block. And this is one of those great things, because it doesn't say you can't use it on a block, so the opponent tries to block something, you respond with their check to be like, yeah, that check to block looks nice until it gets -4. Now, an attack that they thought they were going to be able to block is now, that 21 damage Queen of Hearts that is now unstoppable due to their checks being at, -5 or 6, depending on how many Akuma abilities you've played. All around, it's a great card. I have it at 2 of. It doesn't have a block. It's basically just 2 of because I see it frequently enough to need it when I need it and not see it when I don't want it. And that covers all our actions. Now we will get to the foundation base of our deck. Starting off here with our anti-draw cards, I guess you'd say. We got 1 of here for Mother Russia, Venomous, and Esoteric Yoga. Bonus points for Esoteric Yoga because it's a 6 check. But basically all of these have effects that punish your opponent for drawing cards during their turn in some way, shape, or form, either by canceling their draw effect or by removing the card they just drew from their hand. Because, like I said, one of our modes of play here is making sure they don't have blocks and don't have the ability to block, so we can push those beefy attacks through. And that's what these 3 do. This one has Commit. When they add a card to their hand, they'll, as long as it's from a non-character effect, of course, then they'll add a card from their hand to their card pool, making their blocks harder, and it's only a commit, so you can use this multiple times. And then when things get really nitty-gritty, you can also destroy it to reset speed. It's a little bit of a defensive piece there as well. We got Venomous. You destroy it whenever the opponent plays an ability on a non-character card that adds any number of cards to their hand, and you just cancel it. It's playable while committed. It's great to have on the field, so as you're discarding stuff again, they just can't replenish their hand. And then this one, of course, if you couldn't guess, being the defensive piece I said, if they add any cards to their hand, they discard a card. This one is also commit, so it's reusable and really nice to have. And if things get worse for wear, you can also destroy it while committed if you wanted to give an attack -4 speed, helping you block something that you may not have been able to. The next couple are a little bit more discard stuff, and that's just to help discard things on your turn in addition to your character effect and some of the attack effects we got. So we got Path of the... I don't know how to pronounce that word. We'll just skip it for now. Basically, it's an Akuma 1-dot card. It's a 3 cost, unfortunately, but if your opponent has 0 momentum, they discard a card. Not a lot of people have tons of momentum all the time. We have a couple ways to discard their momentum as well. So it basically just makes sure that if they do have momentum, they don't use it randomly if this is on the field, because no one wants to randomly discard a card every turn because it's on a commit. And then we have this bad boy at a 1-of, reclaiming what's ours, form, remove. They reveal their hand and they discard 1 card or action revealed that way. So, if you did like Queen of Hearts, sorry, just kidding, as a first form. But anyway, you'll first form, you can reveal their hand, see what kind of blocks they have. If there's any worrying to worry you, you can, buff attacks that you normally wouldn't because you know what they got. And then, of course, if they do have actions, it gets rid of them. It gets rid of their revokes. It gets rid of their stops. Basically all the troubling actions. And it also, more importantly, just gets rid of a card if they had an action in hand, making it so they just can't block with it if they wanted to. We also have a response commit after you discard any cards. It gives you some stuff. It's nice to have as icing on the cake if anyone's trying to discard you. These next 2 cards are here to help your discard and disruption. So this one here, face down cards don't count to play it. But more importantly, whenever you play a power or whenever a powerful attack is played, whether it's yours or theirs, you can remove this card from the game and draw a card and your opponent discards a card. So that's why I said it's important that this has powerful, even though realistically you're never going to use the powerful. The fact that it has it means you can start your turn, drop Queen of Hearts, remove 1 or 2 of these. Your opponent discards now a total of 3 cards off of 1 attack, and all before they can do anything, because assuming they don't have something like Wearlight to where they get to go first or something crazy, your first enhance is going to remove a card, and playing the card removes 2 cards. So it's just all around great, and we have some other powerful attacks in there as well, like Congo. So it'll just help you on that last attack that you really want to just blast them out. Just discard a bunch of cards and draw cards, which will help you potentially draw into Akumas for you to pitch later for attacks or draw into more attacks. All around good. The second enhance, won't even bother talking about it because we probably will never use it. The next one is 3 copies of Resurrected Evil. This is a great disruptive piece, especially since we are stacking characters, so we can, tap any foundations most of the time once we get all 3 Akumas on there, or if we get up to 6 Akumas, we can start tapping their character, which is great. And then when you're ready to kill them, when you got those couple of attacks, you'll just flip it on their turn, and they discard a card. And if you have all 3, that's up to 3 cards you're going to discard from their hand at the start of their turn. That severely neuters what they can do to you, and makes it so when it rolls back around to your turn, that's less cards you have to worry about discarding. Especially if you have something like your reversals here, where you can reversal. Let's say you had, Dreamland here. You have all 5 of these here. You play these 3, they discard 3 cards, they attack with something, you block, reversal with this bad boy, it's powerful, you draw 2 more cards and discard 2 cards, that's 5 cards they discarded, and then it rolls to your turn, and you're just sitting pretty to blast them out of the park with all your effects. So we run 3 copies of those. The next are our last couple 1-ofs that we just have. We got 1 Radicaledward. It has a nice ability to commit asset or foundation with 1 or more keywords. And another reason we run it here is anytime it gets checked, you can add a character card from your discard to your hand. And since we're discarding characters a lot, we have quite a few in the discard pile more often than not. It's nice just to randomly get it back into your hand for more fuel for your attacks. We got 1 Outworld Heiress. It's just there to cancel stun rating and also just to remove any troublesome pieces in your opponent's staging area that you just can't deal with, so you can get rid of it before you start your big game-ending turn. And then we got Retreated to Antarctica, one of the best defensive pieces in the game. If it has 3 or more keywords, you just blank the damage at damage step. So just nice to have at least 1 in there. Then we'll come to the foundations that I just like to call foundations that are just overall good, and just good to have if you can run them. 2 copies of Wearlight gives you a little bit of control in what your opponent can do. Sometimes it outright just reads your opponent's attack gets flash, because they'll do 1 enhance, and then you pick an enhance they literally can't play. They have to pass. You pass. The attack gets pushed through with little to no modifications. The next one is Telekinetic Mastery. Doesn't need an introduction. A great defensive piece. Does some random discard defense, but more importantly on 6 checks, which we have a lot of 6 checks in this deck. There's a lot of times you're just going to free cast this bad boy. If they ever try to increase stats, you just give it minus stats. Then we have a nice 6 check that has bonkers good effects. We have Serving the Outworld. 2 copies of this. On a 6 check, you can modify damage with plus or minus, depending. Again, I'll state we have a lot of 6 checks, so you'll pass this more often than you might think. And then commit. Your opponent plays non-character form ability, you cancel it. It works great. If they try to play some random action form, you're just like, nah, you're not doing that today. And of course, Face of a Monster. It has discard on it, although you'll probably never use it. It's there. It's great. It's a good card. Doesn't need an introduction. Helps you kill speed. Lets you block stuff. On the off chance you get to Desperation quick, you can change zones, which helps us with our mid, for the most part, attacks. Then we go to our spammables here. We got 2 Feifeis, great defensive piece. Flip, give it -3 speed. You'll be able to block most things as long as it's not some insanely high speed attack. We got 1 copy of Quest for Vengeance, just because it's a nice block that you can have your opponent discard a card. Sometimes they'll see it coming, sometimes they won't. They'll be expecting to do something crazy, saving their last card for defense, and then their last card's gone and it's your turn. All around good. And then the last one is Voice of Reason. We got discard in there. Let's say you see their hand. You don't have anything to get rid of stuff outright, but you know they have the 1 or 2 cards to stop you. You use this. They have to discard 1 or more of them. Or, in a lot of cases, if you're out of cards, it's not a cost to discard, so you can play it to essentially draw a card. So if you're out of cards on the opponent's turn, or you're out of cards on your turn, and you really need that last attack, or you really need that extra thing just in your hand to use your Akuma ability, just once per turn this bad boy, discard card, and then draw a card. It's great, and it's a 0 cost, so you get lots of foundations there. And that is our deck today. I hope you enjoyed it. This was again, the Akuma 3-dot. All around broad focus is to get cards out of your opponent's hand, make sure they can't block, make your attacks gigantic, push the damage through. If they do have cards, just hack their checks to nothing. And that's the premise. If you guys want to see an example of this, again, there'll be probably a link to the gameplay that this was played in. And if not, then no problem. But thank you guys for watching. I hope you're enjoying these deck profiles. If you are, please let us know below. It'd be nice to know if you guys have anything else you want me to mix up or change about it. If there's any other content you guys want to see in the future, let me know. And if you're interested in our Patreon, you can go ahead and check it out, just like all these fine people have done. And thanks for stopping by, guys. Take care.